Welcome back. So, broadly, you guys know I've been pretty thrilled about what's gone on with BlizzCon, right? We've got Season of Discovery, pretty much our first step into Classic Plus. That's pretty sweet. Let's also be real, it'll probably have a Scarlet Monastery raid. That's just kinda cool. And for the rest of the game, WoW is actually going somewhere, right? And the things that we're getting actually seem cool. A group of Arathi humans with fire, light, crusader aesthetics, and big airships, check. Turbo Earthen Loch Modan, check. Underground Nerubian Zone, like what Blizzard wanted to do for Wrath of the Lich King, check. Xalatath, yes please. And also, our next two expansions are old world revamps, and from what people have heard, these seem to be full rebuilds that will actually have those zones be, bigger than they've been in the game before. I mean, come on, a Northrend redo for a brand new expansion, that is a dream to me. Yet, underneath, there is a rumbling. There is the sound of billions of dollars pouring into Microsoft's coffers. Is the game getting more expensive? Are expansions going to be more frequent, charging us more money more of the time? Will it be more deeply monetized? Let's actually dive into this and work out what we know about WoW's future. And you can help afford it with today's sponsor, U.GG. Click the link in the description or head to u.gg/wow and you can get the best data-driven talents, character builds, base gear, and more. No guides, just quick and easy insights. That's what they do. They hoover up and crunch that data of what your fellow WoW players are actually using, what they're actually doing, and they pull insights from that and then slickly give you all the info you want in one place. Take Hunter as an example. You can see their most popular talents for M+ and Raid, as well as PvP once the season starts. For Mythic Plus, I can see that this build was used by the overwhelming majority. It's pretty neat to know, right? I can look through Mythic Plus and Raid for every role to see how the specs are actually faring against each other with their tier lists and see what sort of damage numbers I could perhaps be expecting in dungeons. And it really is that simple. They crunch a whole bunch of numbers from countless thousands of player runs, and you could get all of those learnings in one place for free. And that's basically it. If you go to u.gg/wow or click that link down below, you can get all the info, and I know I will certainly have them bookmarked for Season 3 of Dragonflight. Right, World of Warcraft expansion price history time. Legion cost $49.99. Legion Deluxe, $69.99. Now the base edition included a level boost, the Deluxe had a mount and a pet. BFA. Base edition, $49.99, with a level boost and a $69.99 digital deluxe that also had a mount and a pet. So far, so similar. Shadowlands, however, changed things. Shadowlands split it into 3 editions. The base edition was $10 cheaper, only $39.99, and if all you care about is the game, you can get it for $10 cheaper. The Heroic Edition is $59.99, a midpoint between the old base and digital deluxe editions. The difference is it had a mount, a boost, and a transmog. So essentially, the boost went to an edition that cost $10 more, and the mount and the transmog appeared at $59.99 instead of $69.99 where they maybe would have been in the past. Then of course, Shadowlands has its Epic Edition, which has the pet, the Hearthstone effect, the weapon enchant, and 30 days of game time for $79.99. Now, if you are buying WoW 6 months at a time, that 30 days of game time is worth about $12.99. Now, I would consider that to be a fairly real value because that is actually the cost of playing World of Warcraft, other than, a digital goodie that just gets flipped on in a database for your account. Now, of course, if you already had a 6-month sub to World of Warcraft, it's not like you would have really needed those extra 30 days. So, big picture, right? It certainly is more money, but it's not egregious insofar as modern games go. Dragonflight then was the same, but $10 more, right? Pretty much across the board. What's interesting though is War Within is essentially the same, you would think, because each edition is the same price as Dragonflight, but that base edition now includes a $70 boost. With Dragonflight, the base edition, that cost $49.99, did not include the boost. Now, there's also 500 Tender, but of course Dragonflight did technically come with 500 Tender as well. You can get a mount and a Mog for $69.99, which makes sense based on the past, giving you another 250 Tenders. But the basic thing here is War Within is a better deal at these price levels because the lower edition has the level boost, whereas in Dragonflight, the lower edition didn't. Now, the Epic Edition is obviously where things change, and that's where people get angry. You've got the pet, the toy, the Hearthstone effect, and the beta testing I believe they've done before. What changes it is 3 days early access to the expansion. And we all know what this is, a massive, massive attempt to increase the average revenue per player. As an example, Shadowlands sold through like 3.6 million copies or something like that by launch. Dragonflight didn't do as well, but we could expect a similar-ish ballpark, I think. Now, cosmetics, those can be really done without by loads of players. I think what would matter more to people is a boost. And that's where this expansion is going to be a better deal at its base edition. But that 3-day head start, that's what changes things. This is a growing trend. FF14 did it with Endwalker, but only for pre-orders, not for purchasing a more expensive edition. Diablo 4 did it the exact same way we see here. Starfield did it as well with its hilarious wrinkle where the game was on Game Pass, but you could then get the digital upgrade on top of your Game Pass to get it a few days earlier. Forza's done it, loads and loads of the industry has done it, and it absolutely sucks because it's not early access, it's moving the goalposts and then selling access to the true release date at a premium. Now, when the developers were actually challenging this, they basically said that because the boost was moving down, they essentially needed to find a place of value, and given that the lot of the rest of the industry is doing this, this is what they ended up going with. Which, by the way, is a good example of how it's actually worth pushing back against these things, because if one publisher does it, all the others will look to that as an example and say, hey, we're not really moving the Overton window, they've already done it, so it's okay if we do it. Now, of course, the Blizz devs have spoke about there being no real advantage here, right? No long-term one, at least. All of those weekly things, those will not be active during the 3 days of early access, right? So it's not like you're going to be getting a big head start in really anything other than just leveling up your characters. But actually leveling up characters is something that people want to do at the start of an expansion. So I think that to believe that is to be kind of willfully ignorant of a lot of the social dynamics of MMORPGs as well. And, MMO developers, they probably know what those dynamics are. But of course, put yourself in their shoes. They know exactly what's going on here just as well as you or I, right? So, of course, they are going to just keep their head down, right? In any interviews, anyone kind of would in that position. I mean, sure, if a developer came out against it, everyone on Twitter or whatever would say, beast. But then guess what would happen? They'd face a whole bunch of repercussions. This is exactly what you think it is, blatant profiteering. And yes, it is all preseason content. It won't really matter in a week or two, but the principle counts even when, yes, weekly quests, Mythic Zero dungeons, some other features won't be active until the game is truly live. Because ultimately what's happening here is they're monetizing you being logged into WoW, seeing your guild playing War Within content, and you simply not being able to click the quest to go and play. That absolutely sucks. The thing is though, will the existence of this actually stop anyone from playing the game in truth, right? Let's be real about that for a little. I like WoW. I dislike this move, but it isn't a world of binaries. To me, the positives of enjoying World of Warcraft with my guild easily outweigh the negative aspects of this latest move. And for a lot of people, I suspect it is similar. I mean, this tactic sure as hell did not make a dent on Diablo 4, Starfield, or the other games that have came beforehand. Make no mistake, personal decisions aside, this is an objectively terrible move for an MMO insofar as the social dynamics and all of that go. You can probably bet the majority of developers on the WoW team, if they had the choice, would not support this. But they, and we, have no choice. So, is World of Warcraft more expensive then? Is it more expensive than Dragonflight? No, it's not. The base edition is the same price and is a better value because it includes the leveling boost. Something I haven't seen mentioned much. However, is an identical experience to the launch of Dragonflight a more expensive thing? The answer there is yes, because I played Dragonflight the same day everybody else did, and now that costs $89.99, so fuck that. The next thing then, so Legion had 4 raids, 10 dungeons, a mega dungeon, and Argus, which is fairly massive, along with world content updates. BFA was actually pretty giant at the end. It had 4 raid tiers, it brought world content in with just about every patch. You have Nazjatar, Mechagon, and a mega dungeon. Shadowlands, 3 raid tiers, mega dungeon, a bad patch zone, and a pretty good patch zone. Less content than the prior two, however, at least it did avoid a full content drought with Season 4. Dragonflight then seems to be Shadowlands, but delivered on time. I mean, come on, 3 raid tiers, mega dungeon, 2 patch zones, top line, all very similar. But when you get into the details, it is a bit different. You get the likes of the Trading Post, the broadly great Heritage Armor quest lines, Forbidden Reach, Time Rift, Stream Surges, quite a lot of other bits of content and story that they've had in their pretty much a patch every 8 weeks cycle, class development that would put recent expansions to shame, better communication, and so many other things. So headline features, yeah, Dragonflight is similar to the amount of content that Shadowlands. Dive into the details though, and I think it is fair to say that there is more to Dragonflight and that it is quite a bit better designed. So here's the question then. If Blizzard are going to put out expansions faster than normal like they say they're going to, is it safe to assume that this Dragonflight model of expansion size continues? I think the answer is yes. They've spoke about how they are working on Midnight content right now and how their larger team is reorganized, their production to be significantly more in parallel. I believe they've talked about having 2 expansion teams and a live team as an example. So that means, what can we expect money and content-wise? First, Dragonflight isn't done. We've actually found out there will be 3 more content patches. There will be 0.2, 0.5, 0.2.7, and we also believe 0.2.9 or something like that. The Blizzard team basically said there are 3 more, which is literally more than Shadowlands. Shadowlands did have 9.2.5, but it was fairly small. So Dragonflight's equivalent to that will almost certainly be larger. It'll have a smoother plot progression into War Within. They've already confirmed that yes, Amir Drasil is the final raid here, but there is going to be more content. We also know there's going to be a fated sort of remix season like there was in Shadowlands, but from what we understand, there are still a few surprises left in terms of gameplay and features. So, that is all to say, these expansions compared, yes, in terms of number of raid tiers, you could totally say that Dragonflight is the same as Shadowlands. In terms of the other things surrounding that, no, I think Dragonflight is definitely superior. And now the next thing that isn't really talked about as much. Empty subscriptions, sort of what I call them. It was a problem in WoW's past where there'd be a content drought and maybe your sub would still be rolling. Maybe there'd be a few months of your 6-month sub left and there'd be nothing to do. So here's the thing. If we get the same amount of content, but we get that amount of content in less time, and our time is $15 a month, then it's actually possible that you are getting a better deal, even if you're getting the same amount of content, because that content is delivered to you really for less subscription fee. So that's why this 8-week content cycle is potentially quite good. Now, Chris Metzen said expansions will come out quicker. He mentioned finishing the story by 2030, which, to be honest, I think would have happened anyway, even if they weren't coming out quicker, right? Because, like, right now, they do have an expansion every 2 years, pretty much through thick and thin. If it's going to be faster than that, I personally expect every 18 months. That means probably 3 season-long expansions, and then into the next expansion. Essentially, 3 6-month raid tiers. And if you do have an expansion every 18 months, that does mean that you are paying 6 months less World of Warcraft subscription fee per expansion that you're playing. Now, if that is happening, but you're getting the same amount of content as a previous 2-year expansion within that 18-month span, then you are essentially getting, well, more content for your money because you're not paying as much subscription fee because that content is not being dragged out across a longer subscription period. So it's one of those things. If the expansion had the exact same amount of content as Dragonflight, cost $10 more, but delivered that content in, say, 6 months, fewer time, less time, actually it would end up being cheaper than Dragonflight because that's how sub money works. Which in a way does feel like I'm trying to make an excuse for them, but I suppose it is a real factor that does happen with the economics here. So basically, if War Within is the same amount of content as Dragonflight, but is an 18-month long expansion, you'll be paying less sub fee for it. So even if it was $10 more expensive, assuming you were playing for the whole expansion and kept a sub rolling, it actually would be cheaper for that same amount of content because you'd be paying fewer months of your sub fee. Now here's the question. Is WoW actually growing? And can we feel like we're actually getting value for our money? Okay, so in a way you could say we'll get more with War Within. As an example, with World of Warcraft's basics covered, they're now starting to add solo queue RPGs, they're adding in a new battleground again, they've added a 4th pillar to endgame content as well, and they've added warbands. Not to be a copium dealer, but this does feel like it's the game meaningfully growing in a way that is not built around some sort of disposable junk food system. Which, to be honest with you, like if we're paying our sub fee and we're paying our sub fee going through a bunch of trash that will just be thrown in the bin, well, I would far rather that they're growing the game in an evergreen fashion like they seem to be now, which to me does feel like it's a bit more in line with a longer term value for a subscription. Now, because I know people are going to bring it up, I should mention inflation and play around with an inflation calculator. I'll stick to the US for simplicity. Legion cost $49.99 in 2016, that's $64 in today's money. BFA also cost $49.99 in 2018, today that would be $61.27. Shadowlands cost $39.99, but had no boost, which is basically $48 today. Dragonflight's base edition was $49.99 with no boost, while War Within is $49.99 with a boost. That means that essentially War Within is a better deal than Dragonflight, until you remember that it no longer includes the true launch day. And also, the hard sells everywhere. Let's start counting bundles, because every year has got 2 6-month sub bundles, but then during a special period they open that up to be one really large 12-month bundle that's got even more amounts. We've got the rate of store transmogs increasing, we've got the rate of store microtransactions and the bundled tender, which essentially monetizes the trading post, increasing. The trading post does seem to be getting still quite expensive this month. It was over 9,000 tender to buy everything. You get the picture. Things are getting more monetized in the game. So what's happened here is they've added one extra scummy practice with the early access, but the rest has remained the same, hell, even got better with the boost. But it's amid a backdrop of Dragonflight being a more heavily monetized overall experience. The ultimate question then is, where is the value for you? Value, right, what I'm willing to pay is based on the value of a good or service to me. Something with a low price can be a bad value, something with a high price can be a good value, right? If I am getting the same amount of content per expansion, but I'm paying less sub fee per expansion because they're coming out faster, that is basically fine to me. If it's an expansion every 18 months, the 6 months of content lull sub fee that you would have paid in previous times would wipe out most price increases completely. But here's the thing that Blizzard needs to understand. Even if it technically is a better value, that, okay, remove those 3 days, you pay $50 and you get the same amount of content in an expansion, just that you're saving 6 months of sub fee. That actually is less money for the same amount of content. But the thing is, if we're being nickel and dimed within the game, it will not feel good to people. The thing is though, I wouldn't expect Microsoft to suddenly make this better. Microsoft spent $69 billion on Blizzard Entertainment and Activision and King. They probably do want to make that money back. My read here, basically, with WoW and its future, is that they are in aggressive growth mode for this brand. I think they're finally understanding that World of Warcraft is the beating heart of their company. Ultimately, through thick and thin, compared to the likes of Overwatch, the WoW people do seem to have stuck around and actually paid. If you listen to any BlizzCon crowd, who's the loudest? Guess what? It's us. So that basically means I think we are going to get, in terms of content, a better deal. I don't think we'll get bullshit, free to play like player power, any of those weird Destiny things that have happened. I do expect that the game will be a bit more deeply monetized by continuing with those bundles, continuing with the Trader's Tender, and doing things like the 3-day early access. I think that reflects World of Warcraft having an extremely important role to Blizzard now and in the future. I remember hearing from sources who would know, because they worked at the company for a very long time, that for the longest time, WoW was treated as a cash cow, right? It would make the cash, you funnel that into Titan, Project Titan would be your next big thing, and they didn't really expect WoW to last as long as it did. And that led to some short-term decision-making, right? Some big technical investments not being made when they really should have been. My read in the situation now is that that's not really the case anymore, that they've fully embraced that World of Warcraft is going to be the core of their company, likely for a very, very long time to come. Ultimately then, when I look at the value proposition of the next expansion, I think it is, based on what we understand, better than Dragonflight. As in, if it is 18 months instead of 2 years, and it's the same amount of content, and the same box price, yes, 3-day early access aside, not that I want to put that aside, but you're paying 6 months of less sub, then that is ultimately less money spent for more content, which is a fairly good value. Blizzard's bet, though, is that this will retain people for longer so that they will pay more subscription fee instead of just wandering off and cancelling the game, and that while they are playing World of Warcraft and spending time within that world, within that brand, that they will be more likely to engage in other things like, say, Warcraft Rumble, but also to buy store mounts, to buy bundles, and do all of those things. And yes, to buy bundles with Trader's Tender, because we absolutely know that's going to continue. So then, I would love to know what you think, especially on this idea of an expansion with the same amount of content, but coming out in fewer months, meaning you're paying less sub fee. Does that actually mean anything to you in terms of how you see the value in, yes, this product, but also the cost of entry to a community that we all enjoy partaking in? And I think ultimately, that is where the true staying power lies. Let me know. Thanks to today's sponsor. I'll see you next time.